you hear the laughter first. It echoes off frescoed ceilings painted with saints and angels, bouncing through corridors where cardinals should be praying. Instead, they're watching. 50 women dance in candlelight, their silk gowns pooling at their feet like shed skins. Chestnuts scatter across marble blessed by popes, and the women crawl, naked, laughing, competing, while men in scarlet robes lean forward to judge their performance. The air smells of wine, perfume, and something darker. Smoke from 100 candles mixes with sweat and desire. At the center of it all, seated beside her father on a throne draped in papal gold, sits a 21-year-old woman with hair like spun sunlight. Her face reveals nothing, not shock, not shame, just calm observation, as if she's watching a ballet instead of witnessing the Vatican transform into something history will whisper about for 500 years. She is Lucrezia Borgia, and everything you think you know about her is either horrifying truth or masterful slander. And the terrifying part is that even historians can't tell which. Real quick, drop a comment and tell me what country you're watching from. It absolutely fascinates me that a scandal from Renaissance Italy still grips people across continents half a millennium later. This is Rome, October 31st, 1501, All Hallows' Eve. The barrier between sacred and profane has dissolved completely inside the Apostolic Palace. The event that will become known as the Banquet of Chestnuts is unfolding in real time, documented by Johannes Burchard, the Vatican's Master of Ceremonies, a German bureaucrat whose job was to record papal functions with meticulous precision. His diary entry for this night reads like pornography disguised as administrative record-keeping. But this moment is merely the culmination of a decade of scandal that began when a Spanish cardinal bought his way to St. Peter's throne in 1492. Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, didn't just break his vow of celibacy. He flaunted his children like trophies, weaponizing their beauty and intelligence in a chess game where kingdoms were the prize and family bonds became dangerously, perhaps criminally, entangled. His daughter Lucrezia entered history at age 11, a golden-haired child destined to become either the most slandered woman in Renaissance Europe or one of its most depraved. The truth, buried beneath 5 centuries of propaganda, revenge, and political calculation, remains maddeningly elusive. What's certain is that she was married 3 times before age 21, that 2 of her husbands died violently, that accusations of incest and murder followed her like shadows, and that her name became synonymous with everything corrupt about papal power. But who was she really? Victim or villain? Pawn or player? The question has haunted historians since the 16th century, and the answer might be more complex and more human than either extreme allows. Lucrezia Borgia was born in 1480, the illegitimate daughter of Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia and his mistress Vanozza de Catane. In Renaissance Italy, bastard children of clerics were common enough to barely merit comment, unless their father decided to conquer Rome. When Rodrigo engineered his election as Pope Alexander VI in 1492, through a campaign of bribery that scandalized even corrupt Italian politics, his children inherited more than wealth. They inherited targets on their backs. The Borgias were Spanish outsiders ruling an Italian city that despised foreign control. Every noble family in Rome saw them as usurpers. Every political alliance was temporary. Every feast could be their last. Daughters in this world weren't children. They were ammunition. Lucrezia grew up in a palazzo where love and strategy were inseparable. Her father adored her. That much seems historically certain. He called her the dearest thing in the world, in letters that survive in Vatican archives. But his affection expressed itself through political marriages that treated her body as a renewable resource for diplomatic advantage. Her education prepared her for this role with ruthless efficiency. She learned Latin, Spanish, French, and Italian. She studied poetry, painting, and music. She could discuss theology with cardinals and military strategy with generals. Renaissance observers praised her quick mind and ethereal beauty in equal measure. But intelligence in women was dangerous currency. It made them more valuable as political assets and more vulnerable to accusations of manipulation. Her first marriage at age 13 was to Giovanni Sforza, a minor noble whose family controlled military forces Alexander needed. The wedding in 1493 blazed with enough gold to ransom armies. Lucrezia, barely adolescent, stood beside her 26-year-old husband like a doll positioned for display. The marriage bed became a site of humiliation that would echo through history. Giovanni expected a compliant wife. Instead, he discovered a girl who moved through Vatican politics with unsettling grace, whispering to her father in private audiences, laughing at her brother Cesare's jokes with what witnesses called unnatural intimacy. Within 3 years, the political winds shifted. Alexander's alliance with Milan, Giovanni's family, became a liability when better offers arrived from France. Marriages that no longer served papal interests could be dissolved, and Alexander found a solution so cynical it became legendary. He declared Giovanni impotent, preserving Lucrezia's supposed virginity for her next political transaction. The mathematics were absurd. Giovanni's first wife had died in childbirth, biological proof that his manhood functioned perfectly well. But who dared contradict a pope? Giovanni Sforza's revenge arrived not with swords, but with words that would stain Lucrezia's reputation forever. Standing before Italian noble courts in 1497, he declared that Pope Alexander had annulled the marriage because he wanted his daughter for himself. The accusation landed like a grenade. The Spanish pope, already despised as a foreign usurper, was now accused of raping his own daughter. And she had submitted willingly, Giovanni claimed, because she was already sleeping with her brother Cesare. The scandal was too delicious, too politically useful, too perfectly calibrated to destroy Borgia credibility. It spread through Italy's courts like plague. But here's what makes the accusation genuinely chilling. Giovanni had lived in the Vatican for 4 years. He had observed the Borgia family dynamics intimately. He had attended private dinners, witnessed closed-door meetings, seen moments when guards were dismissed and expressions changed. His accusations weren't random arrows fired in rage. They were surgical strikes aimed at specific vulnerabilities he'd personally observed. Renaissance families often displayed physical affection that modern observers might misinterpret. Siblings kissed on the mouth, fathers and daughters embraced intimately, and such gestures signified familial love, not incest. But Giovanni's testimony suggested something beyond normal Renaissance affection. He described the way Cesare looked at his sister, the tone Alexander used when speaking to Lucrezia in private, the frequency with which she visited her father's chambers alone, late at night, emerging hours later with her hair disarranged and her eyes red. The rumors metastasized. Every gesture between Lucrezia and Cesare became evidence. Every private audience with Alexander gained sinister significance. When she laughed at her brother's jokes, observers noted forbidden passion. When she kissed her father's hand, witnesses detected incestuous desire. Renaissance Italy transformed ordinary family interaction into pornographic theater. Yet, something strange flickered beneath these accusations. Lucrezia never denied them with hysterical outrage. She didn't weep publicly or demand vindication. Instead, she smiled enigmatically and changed subjects. Was this the composure of someone falsely accused? Or the confidence of someone who understood that certain truths were too dangerous to acknowledge? The historical record offers no clarity. What survives are letters between Lucrezia and her father that reveal deep affection, but stop short of anything explicitly incriminating. Eyewitness accounts describe their embraces as lasting longer than propriety suggested, but not definitively crossing into sexual territory. The evidence is maddeningly ambiguous, suggestive enough to fuel centuries of speculation, insufficient to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Then came the poison allegations. These emerged slowly, like fog creeping across the Tiber, until they engulfed Lucrezia's entire reputation. She allegedly wore a hollow ring, la cantarella, containing enough arsenic to kill a man within hours. At dinner parties, she would twist the ring's delicate mechanism, dispensing white powder into wine cups with the casual grace of someone serving dessert. The image was irresistible. A golden-haired angel dealing death while discussing poetry. Renaissance Europe worshipped and feared poison in equal measure. It was the perfect murder weapon. Silent, untraceable, leaving victims to die in apparent natural agony while killers maintained perfect alibis. Poison was also gendered. It required intimacy rather than strength, subtlety rather than confrontation. A woman could poison a man while sharing his bed, making love and death dance together in ultimate betrayal. Every mysterious death near the Borgias became Lucrezia's handiwork in popular imagination. Cardinals who opposed Alexander died of sudden fever, obviously victims of the papal daughter's hollow ring. Political rivals collapsed at banquets. Clearly, Lucrezia had been nearby, smiling sweetly while administering lethal doses. The mathematics of mortality around the Borgia family defied natural explanation, unless someone was helping nature along. But here's the problem with poison allegations. They're nearly impossible to prove or disprove 5 centuries later. Medical records from the 1490s are sketchy at best. Autopsies were rare. Symptoms of arsenic poisoning, fever, vomiting, diarrhea, mimicked common diseases like cholera and plague. Distinguishing between natural death and murder required forensic techniques that wouldn't exist for another 300 years. What remained were whispers, political motivations for accusation, and the undeniable pattern that Alexander's enemies died at suspiciously convenient moments. Cesare Borgia certainly poisoned people. That's historically documented. His military campaigns left trails of mysteriously dead rivals. But attributing specific murders to Lucrezia relied more on gendered assumptions about feminine warfare than actual evidence. Still, the legend grew. By 1500, every Italian mother warned daughters about Lucrezia Borgia's hollow ring. Every foreign diplomat approached Vatican banquets with justified paranoia. The papal daughter's reputation had become a weapon in itself. Even if she'd never poisoned anyone, her alleged capability made her terrifying. Her second marriage brought genuine affection, and even more suspicious death. Alfonso of Aragon arrived in 1498, 17 years old, heartbreakingly handsome, heir to Naples' royal line. He gazed at Lucrezia with something that looked like love. She looked back with eyes that had already seen too much. For nearly 2 years, they lived in something resembling happiness. Alfonso brought youthful passion to counter Lucrezia's sophisticated mystery. She gave him glimpses of vulnerability that made him believe he could save her from Vatican corruption. They had a son together, Rodrigo, born in 1499. But salvation requires honesty, and the Borgias couldn't afford honesty. Political calculations shifted again. Alfonso's royal connections became liabilities when Alexander needed different French alliances. The young prince found himself surrounded by enemies, sleeping beside a wife whose loyalty belonged first to family survival. On July 15, 1500, assassins attacked Alfonso on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica. Swords flashed in Roman sunlight, blood pooled on sacred stone. But Alfonso survived, dragging himself back to his apartments where Lucrezia nursed him with what witnesses described as genuine devotion. For weeks, she barely left his side. She tested his food for poison, dismissed suspicious servants, kept vigil while he recovered. Her care seemed authentic enough that even skeptics wondered if perhaps she truly loved this husband. But on August 18th, strangers in papal livery entered Alfonso's chambers and strangled him in his bed while Lucrezia waited in an adjacent room. The timing was too convenient. The execution too clean. The aftermath too beneficial to Borgia interests. Alfonso's death cleared the path for more advantageous alliances. It also fed the darkest suspicions about Lucrezia's role. Did she signal the assassins when guards were dismissed? Did she drug his wine to make the killing easier? Or did she simply turn away, choosing family loyalty over romantic love in a calculation that haunts her legacy? Her reaction revealed complex layers. She mourned genuinely. Tears stained her face at the funeral. Sobs racked her shoulders during the Requiem Mass. But she also accepted condolences with practiced grace that suggested understanding that dead husbands were occupational hazards in papal politics. Within months, she was entertaining marriage proposals again. Not because she lacked grief, but because choice had been removed from her life's calculations. And then came the banquet of chestnuts. October 31st, 1501. Johannes Burchard's diary records every grotesque detail with the clinical precision of someone documenting evidence for future judgment. Cesare Borgia invited 50 prostitutes to his Vatican apartments for entertainment that redefined papal hospitality. The women danced clothed at first, silk rustling across marble while cardinals watched from cushioned chairs. Wine flowed, inhibitions dissolved. Then the garments came off. Naked courtesans performed for Pope Alexander himself, who watched from his throne like an emperor reviewing entertainment. Burning candelabras were placed on the floor, chestnuts scattered across tiles, and the women crawled on hands and knees to collect them while Rome's most powerful men evaluated their bodies. Prizes were announced for the most enthusiastic sexual performances: silk tunics, jeweled shoes, golden bracelets. The Vatican, seat of Christian moral authority, had transformed into a combination brothel and gladiatorial arena where flesh competed for imperial favor. But what makes the story genuinely disturbing is Lucrezia's presence. She wasn't hidden away. She sat beside her father and brother, judging the competitions, awarding prizes, laughing at performances like someone born to such entertainment. Burchard's testimony suggests this wasn't isolated incident but routine Borgia behavior that October night simply happened to be most thoroughly documented. The scandal spread across Europe within weeks. Kings crossed themselves. Queens whispered behind fans. Cardinals wrote letters condemning Borgia corruption while privately calculating how to secure future invitations. But everyone agreed. The Borgias had transformed Christ's earthly kingdom into something that bore no resemblance to his teachings. Lucrezia's third marriage to Alfonso d'Este in December 1501 required financial negotiations resembling the purchase of damaged merchandise. Her reputation had become so toxic that Alfonso's family demanded 100,000 ducats, enough gold to fund armies. She approached the altar telling her father that her previous husbands had been very unlucky. Two dead before age 21 suggested either supernatural curse or deliberate pattern. The marriage to Alfonso offered something Lucrezia had never experienced: distance from Rome. In Ferrara, she could finally exercise her considerable intellectual gifts in environments that valued culture over conspiracy. She patronized poets, commissioned art, established charitable foundations. Letters between her and poet Pietro Bembo revealed a mind capable of matching Renaissance Italy's greatest literary intellect. But even these innocent correspondences sparked rumors of adultery. Could a woman like Lucrezia maintain purely intellectual relationships? Her enemies thought not. Every friendship became evidence of sexual transgression in calculations that said more about Renaissance misogyny than about Lucrezia's actual behavior. She lived 39 years, dying in childbirth in 1519 after producing 8 children for the d'Este family. Her later years were marked by genuine piety and cultural achievement that should have rehabilitated her reputation. But redemption proved impossible. The scandals of her youth had calcified into historical fact regardless of contradictory evidence. So, what's the truth? The historical record offers no definitive answers, only maddening ambiguities. Did Lucrezia commit incest with her father and brother? The evidence suggests political slander weaponized by Borgia enemies rather than actual transgression. Renaissance families displayed physical affection that modern observers easily misinterpret, and Giovanni Sforza had obvious motivations for making accusations he couldn't prove. Did she poison her enemies? The pattern of convenient deaths around the Borgias suggests systematic elimination of obstacles, but Lucrezia's specific involvement remains speculative. Attributing murders to her relied more on gendered assumptions about feminine warfare than forensic evidence. Did she participate willingly in the banquet of chestnuts and similar depravities? Burchard's diary confirms the event occurred and that Lucrezia was present, but her emotional state, enthusiastic participant versus reluctant observer obeying family commands, remains unknowable. Young women in papal courts possessed limited agency to refuse their father's orders. The truth about Lucrezia Borgia probably exists somewhere between absolute innocence and complete depravity. She was neither saintly victim nor demonic seductress, but rather a remarkably intelligent woman who survived impossible circumstances through strategic moral flexibility. She was born into a family where political survival required constant ethical compromise. She was raised in an environment where love and power intersected dangerously. She was married repeatedly for reasons unrelated to personal choice. She navigated these circumstances with grace and intelligence that both her admirers and enemies acknowledged. Judging her by modern standards of female agency and individual rights risks missing the brutal realities of her historical moment. Renaissance daughters of powerful families were commodities traded for alliances, their bodies calculated into diplomatic equations balancing power across Italian city-states. The luxury of moral choice was available only to those wealthy enough to afford its consequences. What survived the centuries wasn't truth, but legend, and legends serve psychological functions that facts cannot fulfill. Lucrezia Borgia became an archetype, the dangerous woman who uses beauty and intelligence to destroy men and destabilize institutions. She represents corruption that emerges when power operates without moral restraint. She symbolizes family dysfunction that results when love becomes subordinated to political survival. These archetypal elements explain why her story continues fascinating audiences despite historical uncertainty. The myth serves cultural purposes that accuracy cannot satisfy. Writers from Victor Hugo to Alexandre Dumas to Lord Byron obsessed over her, each adding layers of romantic tragedy or gothic horror that had little connection to documented reality. Byron stole locks of her hair from Milan's Ambrosian Library in 1816, calling them the prettiest and fairest imaginable. He understood that Lucrezia represented something irresistible to artistic temperaments, a woman who had allegedly transgressed every moral boundary while maintaining beauty and intelligence that inspired devotion centuries after death.